Hey friends, before we start this episode of the show, I just want to let you know that today is a best of compilation episode. So I am going to be sharing a few different clips from a few of my friends that are going to be guests at Theology Beer Camp, which is an event I have been going to for a few years now in October. I love each and every one of these conversations in their entirety, and you can check those out on the channel or through the podcast. But there's a few little segments here that I thought were noteworthy and enjoyable, and they also give you a bit of a forecast of the people that are going to be at Theology Beer Camp. If this is an event that interests you, I've put links in the episode description that you can follow up with more information. Please enjoy these segments from conversations with Leah Robinson, Kutter Callaway, Kristy Whaley, and Derrick Weston. We're going to be talking about Poltergeist, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Bride of Frankenstein, and Godzilla. I know that is a fearsome 4 films all packed into one episode, but I hope you enjoy this best of edition of the show. Why does it seem like it gets easier and easier to do that in day-to-day life? But then also when someone says like, hey, by the way, we shouldn't forget this thing, or we should reconcile with this thing, or we should come to grips with this piece of our history, thing that we've done to other people, things that people have done to us, basically unpacking the terribleness of, history. Why has it become easy to both ignore that or justify it? I know that's a deeply complex question, but it feels like that happens so often, whether it's in the news and our own personal lives. It's so prevalent. And I wonder why.
Yeah. I mean, I go back to when I lived in Ireland. There's always an anecdote in here, but it is important because I dated for a long time this Irish guy, and we would have a yearly thing where we would go to the graveyard. It's the Day of the Dead. It's the same Day of the Dead situation. And we would go and we would drink and we would sit by the graves and we would remember and we would cry and it was hard and we had to wrestle with stuff. And but it was a great celebration. You'd eat food, but you'd talk about everyone in the graveyard because it was like,
Yeah.
and I think with all denominationalists, I think Protestants, we want to forget. Like when people die, it hurts. So we don't want to remember. We don't want to deal with uncomfortable things. And so this is my theology coming out. But I think with humans, especially, I'm going to contextualize it in the US, is that we live in a culture that's very selfish. Like it is a very selfish, it's not a communal culture. It is a very, the
Individualized.
American dream. Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
individualized. And so if it means that like one person gets to have the house of their dreams, but they have to pave over an entire graveyard to do that, well, those people are dead, and that doesn't benefit that person
Yeah.
alive. So we'll just go ahead and do it. And I think you can use that as a metaphor too, but we've done that with, I mean, I teach US religion and American history as a class to undergrads, and we start at the beginning and we say, the native peoples, like, they thought it was the promised land, these pilgrims. And why did they think it was the promised land? Well, because they said God told them it was, and they got there and these native people were already there. And they were like, well, you know, we'll just kill you.
Well, yeah, because and again, if I'm paraphrasing out of pocket here, let me know. But
Yeah.
it's the idea of like, we are so sold on our version of this dream, this divine right to take
Yeah.
this place, that you being here is kind of inconvenient for us. So
Well, and they
we,
theologize it. The
right.
manifest destiny is all about, like, it's theology. They said, God, you just are not a
Yeah.
part of God's plan.
Yeah. Like you being here is a stepping stone to us being here. So we're going to remove stepping stones, but like in Poltergeist, we're going to leave the bodies. Remove the stepping stones, leave the bodies. The nuclear family aspect of the Sawyers, who are affected by this industrialization in their own way, a perversion of the nuclear family, that they're their perversion of it, like the dinner scenes. What, like, why is that? Like, every Texas Chainsaw movie has a scene like that, and why is that so principle? It's principal iconography for this franchise.
Yep. Yeah. It's like like a Black Mass version of what we think about is this sort of sacred American ritual. Right. The Norman Rockwell,
Yes, the
you
rock.
know, it is. And even today, right? I mean, that people will talk about the nuclear family as like the thing that is propping up all of Western democracy. Like if that goes down, the whole thing goes down. Um, and so you could take it a few different ways. One, clearly, I think the film is doing that sort of like Black Mass thing, right? Like this is a profane version of something that is held sacred, and it's deeply unsettling because that reveals, I think, well, there's sort of two things. There's two ways to go about it if you're going to think about it, let's say theologically. Um, so on the one hand, what they are doing as a family is a kind of what I would call idolatry. And idolatry from a theological perspective is essentially a good that becomes misdirected. It itself isn't a. So what happens when you take something that God has created and given humans, and then you distort it in a way that all of a sudden it's functioning in a way that should be reserved for God, right? So that's kind of what I mean by idolatrous. So they've distorted, misdirected, because structurally all the elements are there, right? This is just a lovely nuclear family loving each other and doing good by murdering people, right? um, so uh, so clearly we say that's not good,
Right.
even though it's a really close knit nuclear family.
They're
There
very
must be,
close.
yes, they're very close. But the other thing is the back to kind of similar like the bodies, like our revulsion at it um, reveals the things that we hold sacred, right? And a question we could ask as Americans, and I actually think as American Christians, then, is that if that is so revolting and so effective, and how profoundly it affects us, it reveals something about the way we really do imagine the nuclear family. We really do imagine the nuclear family as sacred. And that theologically is a problem because Jesus very clearly says it's not biological kin that count as my family. These are not my brothers and sisters. Those who do the will of my Father are my brothers and sisters. So he's literally saying, he's not saying nuclear families are bad. He's just saying this isn't where the sacredness lies.
Yeah.
And as soon as you see it as a indispensable part of your society, you might actually be committing an idolatry. Like you actually hold this nuclear family up in a way that it shouldn't be. When you're this revolted by the film doing something with it, it might reveal that kind of idolatry lying underneath. So those are kind of the two ways I would think about it in terms of how at least this movie, and I haven't watched all of the various different spinoffs to know if it's similar, but
She is created in the film to placate her Adam. So, ergo, she is a reimagining of what a modern Eve would be. Now, for those of us that may not be so familiar, the creation narratives in the beginning of the book of Genesis, they aren't really concerned with what Eve's reaction to all of this is, because she's also created out of nothing. She's minutes old, and it's like, hey, you two, maybe, huh? Yeah. We're not concerned with her passive acceptance of this role.
Yeah.
So when we see the bride as a reimagining of a modern Eve, what does that say about her, the role she's created for, and how this version of the bride kind of assaults that idea?
I think it's a really good reminder of later Eve, because if we read the creation story and are really like reading it and not placing our Sunday school memorized lesson on it, who is the only person fighting with the serpent? Who's the only one saying, I don't think we should eat that apple? Because it's not Adam.
It's no,
Not
it's not.
Adam. He's just like, sure, give me that apple. I'm going to take a bite. Eve is the one being like, I don't think we're supposed to do this. And the serpent is like, no, you're wrong. It's fine. Adam's just sitting because he's there. We're told he's there. He's just
Yeah.
sitting there silently and then he just eats the apple. And so, yeah, I actually see this as like reclaiming who Eve is depicted to be, right? And again, this idea of nature and the woman or nature and the feminine being so intertwined is like, yeah, Adam, is the one we think of or the one that we assume like God made Adam and then he just like, oh, you need a companion, here's Eve, right? But like in fact, Eve becomes far more, and I think that the bride gives her a bit of justice because again, in her rejection of the creature, she's also rejecting like what's going on.
Yeah.
And then the creature comes to his senses and is like, oops, yeah, actually, I remember you're right. We have to go back to being dead. And I'm going to kill Pretorius because he's the evil guy here.
Yeah.
Um, like I'm going to shut this all down literally by pulling the lever. Um, she's the savior. She's the one who fixes things,
And it kind of, it makes sense why, since Lancaster does this performance in the 30s, why she never reprises this role. Like the bride is kind of left on not the cutting room floor, but left to be this icon of a few minutes. And it's not until, the 80s and 90s and modern films like Lisa Frankenstein, Poor Things, and Maggie Gyllenhaal's in a movie, The Bride, where the bride is given this full center stage reimagining or a more full embodying.
Yeah.
Is that in a way like we get to see a moment of her reject this monstrous identity that she is given? Modern recreations of her, are those just further like telling the story forward, how that like
My
gets
favorite
lived out?
telling is Edward Scissorhands.
Oh,
Because like it's obviously Frankenstein being retold, right? But in that one, we get Winona Ryder, who is able to see Edward, still accepts him, and is the one who basically like helps him again to come to a moral understanding of his nature, what he needs to do, etc. And like has a love for him, like not in a partner kind of way. They don't like end up together, but at the same time, like her ability to later tell the story and stuff, and all of that, like go back and see him up there. And I just think like, yeah, there's an embodiment or an autonomy that she's given in that retelling that I think like the bride would have wanted to have. Like,
yeah.
it's
It is.
it's a lot to ask a minutes old human, do you want to be married to this stitched up dude? But perhaps if they had given her a life first, if they had like created her and like, okay, now we're going to treat her better, teach her, help her grow, things like that. Perhaps then she could have also been the savior for the creature, not going to be rejected in the same way because she is beautiful.
Right. And
Have learned a lesson.
I've
I
seen
think
this
that
movie.
it's kind of reclaimed in Edward Scissorhands in a really cool way.
How, after watching Godzilla, after kind of emphasizing this spirit of lament, but also how human innovation leads to a lot of these things as well, when we talk about responsibility in response to a monster, let's be honest, a lot of the larger scale climate and environmental issues that our world struggles with today and is facing are not ones that this generation right now started. Being inheriting things we are feeding a monster that we did not create. How do we, in relationship to nature, how do we accept responsibility, and what do we do with that responsibility as individuals, as people?
Yeah. And I think the importance is like recognizing that we didn't create it doesn't free us of responsibility. That's really important.
Yeah.
Because we still have a responsibility to I always talk about, Jesus' command to love our neighbor includes to love our future neighbor. That like we need to be thinking about our future neighbor, and our future neighbor should have breathable air. Our future neighbor should have clean water. Our future neighbor should have soil they can grow food in. So like, let's not abdicate our responsibility to our future neighbor. Recognizing that, that there's still ways that we are still feeding the monster too.
Yeah.
But like, there's still ways that like we are, we're setting up the electrical poles on this monster that seems to be getting stronger with electricity.
If only we could weaken him, God.
So like, maybe we should stop firing our weapons at Godzilla. And just kind of thinking about like, what are the little ways, because they are going to be like little in the grand scheme of things, but what are the little ways that we divest from the systems that are feeding Godzilla and making the new Godzilla? Like, what are the little ways that we monitor our traveling, and we shop more ethically, we eat more ethically, we take ourselves out of this kind of like cycle of capitalism that just produces plastics that could be easily thrown away. Like, how do we take ourselves out of that? Every one of us doing the little bit that we can with our resources, with our capacity to like just not feed the monster.
Yeah. I think that sense of personal responsibility is really hard for a lot of us to reckon with. It's hard for me to reckon with. Yeah. It's very easy for me to be like, oh, well, a big corporation or a government should just stop doing what they're doing. It's like, okay, that can also be true.
Yeah.
That can be walk in parallel with you also doing what you know is best, not just for yourself. Maybe it's inconvenient for you. A lot of times it is going to be inconvenient for you because companies have made it very convenient to do the wrong thing, and they've made it very expensive to do the right thing.
Right.
So they reverse incentivize you to make the bad choice, which is insanely sick and just gross.
Yeah.
I talk about a real world horror. There you go, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this best of edition of the show today. Again, the link for more information about Theology Beer Camp is in the episode description, and you can go watch any of these full conversations here on the channel for YouTube and on the podcast feed. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and just remember that just because the horrors persist doesn't mean we can't also.